When I was 14, I went to wrestling camp at Cornell. After the camp had ended, my parents drove to Ithaca to pick me up. As a kid, I've always loved tinkering with stuff around the house. And sure enough, I'd already managed to put grape juice and bread yeast together to make wine. Because of my previous experience as a winemaker, my parents suggested that we tour some wineries in the Finger Lakes. I was like, yeah, sure. So the next morning, I woke up early, and I was ready to tour those wineries. Touring wineries wasn't as fun as I thought it'd be. When I made wine at home, I was physically filtering the sediment, washing the bottles, and corking the finished product. And to me, this was fun. But when I toured wineries, it was more of a show and tell. And because I didn't get any physical hands-on activity with the winemaking equipment, I became disinterested. Later that day, when we were touring a winery, we were in its vineyard. And I just became so bored that I needed something, anything to do. As the slightly erratic and opportunistic kid I am, I waited until our tour group had rounded the corner. Then, when there was nobody in my row, I started plucking and eating grapes. Wow! I was amazed at the quality of these wine grapes. And then I asked myself, why is this only reserved for adults? So I did what any rational 14-year-old kid would do, and I started my own company. When I got home, I found it hard to transform this idea I had into something tangible I could work with. This is the first major trap that kids get stuck in. They have this brilliant idea, but because they don't know what to do with it, they quit. This lack of follow-through is deadly, and it serves as the first filter between those that do and those that don't do something extraordinary. I was a stubborn kid. I'd already smelted pennies, built motorized toy boats, and started a parakeet breeding business. So I thought that I could run a grape juice business too. The details of how I launched my startup aren't that interesting. I used Google to find my suppliers, and I used Microsoft Word to design my labels. All the other miscellaneous tasks of launching a startup can be done by a 14-year-old. All you need is some time, hard work, and circumvention of governmental regulation. I pasteurized my first production run in my kitchen using a kettle and a meat thermometer. This is the finished product. So after I had a product, I needed to sell it. My first production run was small, so I was able to sell by hand to my friends. But I did get into one retail location, a Shell convenience store. After I had sold out in my first production run, I was excited to make a second. I had a whole 20-page document full of tips on how I could improve my product. And I was ready to go. I was starting to develop something that many millennials don't seem to have: grit. I was building confidence in my own abilities to create a product that people liked. This confidence is what helped me overcome a seemingly infinite number of hurdles while launching and growing my company. There were so many times throughout the entire process where I just wanted to quit. I just wanted to take the easy way out, and I just wanted to end the pain. But I didn't, and I'm so grateful for that. I know this advice sounds really cliche, and it is, but I cannot stress this point enough. So, for my second production run, I did 10 times the amount of everything I did in the first. I had a whole spreadsheet full of 80-some suppliers, and I was sending out requests for proposals, and we were having a healthy dialogue. I was calling people, emailing people, and to me, this was all fun. I was on a roll. until I met my first real challenge, a businessman bully. After my co-packer had bottled my juice, he sent me an invoice that was more than 40% of what I had originally anticipated. I was outraged. But just to make sure that my outrage was justified, I did some research. I went on trade publication websites, and I looked up facts and figures for bottling and labeling costs. I called my winery friends, and I asked them how much it cost them for people to bottle and label their wine. So the numbers that I found were similar to what I had originally anticipated. So I wrote my co-packer this lengthy email detailing all the facts and figures that I had found, and I cited each one. The next day, he called me back, and he was furious. He started shouting at me over the phone because I wasn't paying him what he thought I owed him. He called me back a few more times after that, and he kept shouting at me, and I kept asking him, "What am I paying for?" He never told me, and he kept shouting at me, so I just stopped answering the phone altogether. One time, when I was waiting in front of school to get picked up, he called me. As I held the ringing phone in my hand and I saw his name, I snapped. I had a huge anxiety attack, and I became depressed. So I didn't answer his call, but later when I went home, I listened to the voicemail that he left, and in it, he called my research horse poop. You could probably infer what he actually said. So even though I was depressed, I was still determined not to give in to his exorbitant demands. That was until he threatened to send a collection agency after me. At that point, I just decided that I should probably talk to my parents about this. And I talked with them, and we determined that the mental and emotional stress I was going through wasn't worth the couple hundred we were arguing over. So this is the third key to my success. I asked for help. I know this isn't a glorious or romantic thing to do, but it is a necessary and practical step. After I had developed my second production run of product, I thought that the worst would be over. This is a picture of me thinking that the worst was over. So I had this product, and now I needed to sell it. I couldn't sell it to my friends because I made too many bottles, so I had to go through retail stores. At first, it was hard. I was 15, and I had no prior training in sales. As a kid who only consumes and doesn't bring home a paycheck, becoming a salesperson was the equivalent of waking up from the Matrix. At first, I had a hit rate of 5%, meaning that out of every 20 stores I contacted, 19 would reject me, and 1 would accept me. One time, I called a restaurant owner, and when he picked up, he was a nice guy. But the second he realized he couldn't make any money off of me, he became rude and tried to interrupt me. After figuring out that I wasn't going to be interrupted, he hung up on me. Despite initial tribulations I had in the beginning, I eventually got my mojo on. In late winter of my junior year, I was signing up a store a week. During that time, raw juice even got silver at the Florida State International Wine and Grape Juice Competition. We had so much momentum behind us that we even got into a liquor store. Pause for a second and realize how incredible that is. The owner of the liquor store I was pitching to literally said, "Kevin, why would anybody go to a liquor store to buy a beverage that doesn't have liquor in it?" His logic was correct, of course, but I was able to persuade him with some favorable terms and an explanation of what I was doing. And now, raw juice is in the house of wine and liquor. Looking back after my second campaign of selling, I realized that the fourth key to my success was something I had done at the very onset of my journey. I had started small. If I had simply gone from this idea in my head to thousands of bottles of juice, I would have been overwhelmed and I would have failed. But because I started small, I was able to gain experience and I was able to take things one step at a time. You should remember that before all of this, I was a regular kid. I put my pants on one leg at a time in the morning, and I still do. But I simply had this idea, and I unknowingly used these 4 tips to help me launch and grow my business. Now that you know these 4 tips, I want you to follow through with your next breakthrough idea. I want you to take it slow at first and gain some confidence and build some grit. I want you to not be afraid to ask for help. I want you to be hungry or thirsty to create something. Thank you.